Mornings start early in Boston. Especially for Melissa Wilson, who works as a creative director at an advertising agency. At 6 o'clock, Melissa woke up before her alarm went off and gazed at her husband Jason, who was breathing softly beside her. Even after 7 years of marriage, she still found comfort in his gentle features. Jason worked as an engineer at an IT company and often struggled with code late into the night, but he was an ideal partner who always respected her work and shared household chores. Up early again? Jason asked without opening his eyes. I have a presentation for a new campaign today. I want to make it perfect, Melissa replied. Your presentations are always perfect. Jason opened his eyes and took her hand. Be confident. I'm always proud of you. Melissa smiled, but felt a slight discomfort at the word perfect. The obsession with perfection was like a curse she had inherited from her mother. Diane Foster was a former teacher who had taught at the local high school for 30 years. Her life had been spent creating a perfect appearance, always mindful of others' opinions. A perfect home, a perfect family, perfect relationships, all these were medals for Diane. In reality, her perfectionism and self-centered personality had created deep divides within the family. Standing in the kitchen brewing coffee, Melissa recalled yesterday's conversation with her mother. Melissa, how are the preparations for my birthday party next week? You've sent out the invitations, right? Have you confirmed the catering? Melissa listened to her mother's sharp voice on the phone while finishing a project proposal with a looming deadline. Yes, Mom. Everything's confirmed. The catering is okay, and I sent out the invitations last week. Did Robert and Betty say they're coming? Those two don't seem to value my birthday much lately. Last year, they just brought a bottle of wine. I wish they'd put more thought into it. Melissa sighed deeply. Uncle Robert and Aunt Betty were her mother's brother and sister, but they had long been exasperated by Diane's self-centered behavior. They showed up at family gatherings on the surface, but their relationship was never warm. They're busy, Mom. But they said they'd come for your birthday, Melissa lied. In reality, they were still undecided about attending. What about Carol? She's been cold lately too. Her Christmas present was cheap. Melissa closed her tired eyes again. Cousin Carol was Aunt Betty's daughter who had been close to Melissa since childhood and was still the only relative she truly trusted. But Carol was often exasperated by Diane's attitude as well. Carol said she's coming too, Mom. Good. It's my 60th birthday. It's a special day. I want it to be perfect. I know, Mom, Melissa said. But the guest of honor shouldn't criticize the attendees. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. You're so cold, Melissa. I just want everyone in the family to celebrate my special day. This was Diane's typical strategy. When her demands weren't met, she accused the other person of being cold. This tactic had been effective on the entire family for years, and everyone behaved as she wished on the surface to avoid upsetting her. Melissa took a sip of coffee and checked her smartphone. 7:45. Time to leave. She quickly grabbed her bag and called out to Jason, I'm going. Take care. Jason came downstairs before his shower and kissed her. Hope you can come home early today. Want to watch a movie together? It's been a while. That sounds lovely, Melissa smiled. I'll be waiting at home at 7. 10 minutes after she left the house, her phone rang. It was a message from her mother. Melissa, don't forget to tell the guests about the dress code for the party. I want everyone to come in formal attire. Melissa put her phone back in her pocket without replying. She needed to focus on today's presentation at the office. Worrying about her mother's party could wait. That afternoon, Melissa was heading home early, still excited about her successful presentation. The new campaign had been praised by the client, and the contract was finalized. She was looking forward to sharing the good news with Jason. About 10 minutes after leaving the office, she received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, is this Melissa Wilson?" an unfamiliar woman's voice asked. "This is Massachusetts General Hospital. Your husband, Jason Wilson, has been in a traffic accident and is currently being treated in the ICU. Please come as soon as possible." Melissa's world stopped. As soon as she hung up, she hailed a taxi to the hospital. Her mind went blank, repeating only Jason's name. His gentle smile, his morning kiss, his "take care" words. Those memories tightened around her heart. "Please, Jason," she whispered with trembling lips. "Stay alive." The fluorescent lights in the hospital were cold, and the silence of the ICU was broken only occasionally by the regular sounds of machines. Melissa sat by Jason's bedside, staring at her husband's face connected to 4 tubes and a respirator. 24 hours had passed since the accident, but Jason had not yet regained consciousness. "Mrs. Wilson." Melissa looked up in response to the voice. A doctor with a name tag reading "Dr. Park" approached her with a calm expression. "I'll update you on the current situation," he said quietly. "Your husband has suffered multiple traumas, but fortunately there's no direct damage to the brain. However, the internal organ damage is serious. The surgery was successful, but his physical recovery is now the key. The next 48 hours will be critical." Melissa clutched her husband's cold fingers with trembling hands. "Will he regain consciousness?" "There's a good chance. But I can't say when. We're providing the best care possible right now." The doctor placed his hand lightly on her shoulder. "Please get some rest too. You can stay here as long as you like, but we can also prepare a bed for you to take a short nap." "Thank you, but I'm fine. I want to stay by my husband's side." After the doctor nodded and left, Melissa turned her gaze back to her husband's face. His usually vibrant face now looked so quiet and fragile. "Please come back," she whispered. At that moment, her phone rang in her pocket. Looking at the screen with tired eyes, she saw it was her mother calling. Melissa took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Mom." "Melissa. I've been waiting for your call. I need to decide whether red roses or white lilies would be better for the party's flower arrangement. Also, did you ask Carol what she's going to wear? I hope it's not something that will outshine me." Melissa was momentarily speechless. She realized that she hadn't told her mother about Jason's accident yet. After arriving at the hospital yesterday, she had briefly contacted family members, but hadn't informed her mother. Her mind had been too confused. "Mom, listen," Melissa said as calmly as possible. "Jason was in a traffic accident. He's in the ICU now." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Oh, I see. That's terrible," her mother's voice showed little sympathy. "But he'll be fine, right? He's young and healthy. The doctor said the next 48 hours are critical. His condition is serious, Mom." "Well." Diane seemed to consider this briefly. "But make sure you keep up with the party preparations for next week. My 60th birthday is special." Melissa gripped the phone in disbelief. "Mom, I can't think about that right now. My husband is in critical condition." "I understand," Diane's voice contained a hint of irritation. "But life goes on. Especially for one of the most important milestones in my life. I've invited everyone. We need to have everything ready." Something broke in Melissa's chest. Emotions she had suppressed for years suddenly surfaced. "It's always about you. Always, in every situation, you're at the center." "What are you talking about?" Diane's voice rose. "As a mother, I've always done my best for you. I provided a perfect home and raised you. And now, On the most important day of my life, I just want you to fulfill your duty as a daughter. Jason is dying. Melissa's voice trembled. My husband matters right now. I can't think about your party. I don't need such a cold daughter. Diane's words were icy. Do you know how many sacrifices I've made for you? And now, when I need you most, you're abandoning me. Melissa's body trembled with fatigue and anger. Enough, she finally said. I'm focusing on Jason now. I'm hanging up. Wait. I'm not finished talking. Melissa hung up without listening to the end of Diane's words. Then she did something she had never seriously considered before. She opened her mother's contact information and pressed the delete button. After answering yes to the confirmation message on the screen, Diane Foster's name disappeared from her contacts. Suddenly, tears streamed down her cheeks. It wasn't just from fatigue but an explosion of emotions released from her complex relationship with her mother that had built up over the years. She wrapped Jason's cold hand in both of hers and pressed her forehead against it. I'm sorry, she whispered. She didn't know who she was apologizing to, her husband, her mother, or herself. The hospital room door opened quietly, and a young nurse entered. Seeing Melissa's condition, she gently said, "Why don't you take a break? Perhaps get some coffee in the cafeteria." Melissa shook her head. I can't leave my husband. The nurse nodded understandingly and quietly checked the vitals before leaving the room. Melissa continued to stare at Jason's face. Please come back, she whispered again. I need you. A week passed. Melissa was sitting by Jason's bedside, gently stroking his hand, listening to the doctor's words. Mrs. Wilson, I have good news, Dr. Park smiled gently. Your husband's readings are improving. He hasn't regained consciousness yet, but he's stable. I can say he's past the critical stage. Melissa sighed with relief for the first time in a week. Thank you, doctor. I recommend you leave the hospital for a while today and get some rest, the doctor said with a serious expression. Your own health is important too. Melissa was reluctant at first, but after the head nurse Mary suggested the same thing, she agreed to leave the hospital for a little while. Just 2 hours, she promised. Then I'll be back. Entering a cafe a block away from the hospital, Melissa felt a bit disoriented by the air of normal life she hadn't experienced in a while. She sat by the window and ordered a café au lait. Drinking something decent for the first time in a week. Incomparable to the lukewarm coffee from the hospital cafeteria. As she quietly picked up the cup and took a sip, her smartphone began to vibrate. Looking at the screen, she saw a call from an unknown number. She had deleted her mother's number, but she remembered Diane's landline number. This wasn't it. Melissa ignored the call and stared out the window. But the calls didn't stop. Another call came in from a different number. And then another from yet another number. What is this? She answered the phone in confusion. Hello? Melissa. Finally you picked up. Her mother's voice came through. I've been calling your phone so many times. Mom. Melissa said in a tired voice. I deleted you from my number for a reason. I don't feel like talking right now. Listen. No one came. Diane's voice was desperate. Not a single person. What are you talking about? But Melissa quickly understood. Today was her mother's 60th birthday. My party. Diane said in a voice that sounded like she was about to cry. I prepared everything as planned. The catering, the decorations, the dress. But no one came. Not Robert, not Betty, not even Carol. Melissa was at a loss for words. She knew her mother had invited dozens of people. Relatives, friends, former colleagues. And not a single one showed up. Did I do something wrong? Diane's voice was now trembling. Why didn't anyone come? Why? At that moment, a feeling of sympathy welled up in Melissa's heart. She had grown tired of her mother's self-centered personality, but this complete isolation was crueler than she had imagined. Mom. She searched for words. I don't know. Just then, her smartphone received a text message. It was from Uncle Robert. Melissa, we need to talk. Can you call me? Mom, I'll call you back, Melissa said. I need to take another call right now. Ignoring her mother's protests, she called her uncle. Uncle Robert. Melissa, her uncle's voice sounded tired. How is Jason doing? He's a little better. The doctor says he's stable, Melissa answered. But, Uncle, did you call about Mom's party today? Yes, about that. His voice suddenly became grave. We decided as a group to not attend. Betty, Carol, and Diane's friends too. But why? Melissa, Robert took a deep breath. Your mother has been controlling and manipulating us for years. We've all put up with it for the sake of her perfect family illusion. But this time, when she prioritized her birthday party over your husband's critical condition, we finally reached our limit. Uncle. Carol told us about your phone call with Diane. While your husband was hovering between life and death, she was only thinking about her party. We couldn't take it anymore. Melissa was stunned. But how does everyone know? Carol shared it in the family group chat. From there, it spread to Diane's friends. No one could tolerate her self-centered attitude anymore. After hanging up, Melissa sat at the cafe table for a while, resting her elbows on it and holding her head. She felt torn between two worlds. On one hand, she felt vindicated that her mother was finally facing the consequences of her years of behavior. On the other hand, it was painful to see her mother isolated in this way. She thought about Jason. Kind, thoughtful, always emphasizing the importance of family. What would he do now? Her phone rang again, and the screen displayed another unknown number. It had to be her mother. After a moment's hesitation, Melissa answered. Mom. Melissa. Diane's voice had lost its previous sharpness. I don't understand what's happening. Everyone seems to be avoiding me. I called Robert, but he didn't answer. Betty too. Not a single friend came. Melissa took a deep breath. Mom, I'm going back to the hospital now. To see Jason. What? Confusion seeped into Diane's voice. But what should I? You should take some time to think about yourself, Mom, Melissa said quietly but firmly. Think about why everyone wants to distance themselves from you. I was supposed to be a perfect mother. Diane's voice rose. A perfect home, a perfect. That's the problem, Melissa said. There's no such thing as perfect, Mom. The perfection you've always sought has actually hurt all of us. Silence continued on the other end of the phone. Finally, Diane said in a small voice, I was just lonely. Melissa felt her chest tighten at those words. She had never heard her mother sound so vulnerable. I'll talk to you again, she said. But right now, I need to get back to Jason. On her way back to the hospital, Melissa was overwhelmed by complex emotions. Years of anger and disappointment, and now sympathy and understanding beginning to emerge. She had wanted to completely cut ties with her mother. But now, she was starting to consider another possibility. Arriving at the hospital, she rushed to the elevator and headed to the ICU floor. When she opened the door, an unexpected sight awaited her. Jason had opened his eyes. Melissa. His voice was weak but firm. She ran to her husband's bedside with tears streaming down her face. Jason. As she grasped his hand, Jason smiled weakly. According to the doctor. I was lucky. Melissa laughed, cried, and kissed his forehead. Welcome back. Jason's recovery was more rapid than the doctors had anticipated. 2 weeks after the accident, he had been moved to a general ward. Melissa sat by her husband's bedside, looking at the Boston cityscape visible from the window. What are you thinking about? Jason asked, noticing her distant gaze. Melissa shrugged slightly. Nothing. Liar, Jason smiled gently. After nearly 10 years together, you think I don't know that look when you're thinking about something serious? Melissa sighed in resignation. I was thinking about Mom. Silence fell over the hospital room. Jason nodded slowly. Melissa had told her husband everything that had happened after the accident, her mother's selfish phone call, deleting her contact, and the birthday party that no one attended. Have you heard from her? Jason asked quietly. She's called a few times. But I didn't answer. Melissa stared out the window. I don't know how to deal with her. Jason raised himself slightly and took Melissa's hand. Despite the 4-needle in his hand, his grip was surprisingly strong. Melissa, there's something I've learned over these past 2 weeks. What? The fragility of life. His eyes were serious. I was 1 step away from death. And I realized something. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. What does that have to do with Mom? Melissa's voice had a hint of irritation. She isn't eternal either, Jason said quietly. Your mother is undoubtedly a difficult person. Self-centered and controlling. But she's also human. Imperfect and vulnerable. Melissa listened in silence. From my near-death experience, I've felt something important, Jason continued. Holding on to hatred and anger only hurts yourself. It's like poison. Forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for yourself. But Mom won't change, Melissa said in a small voice. She's always the same. Even so, you can change, Jason said gently. You can change what you expect from her. Maybe that birthday fiasco was the first time in her life she's truly faced real consequences. It might be the catalyst for change. Melissa gazed at her husband. There was deep truth in his words. Were you always this wise? Must be from the blow to my head, Jason winked. Maybe it activated a hidden part of my brain. They laughed, and that laughter eventually turned to tears. I was so scared, Melissa hugged her husband. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. It's okay, Jason stroked her hair. I'm here. And you need to move forward too. Including your relationship with your mother. That evening, Melissa made a decision. The next morning, she briefly left the hospital and headed to her mother's house. Her childhood home, a typical New England-style house, had always been surrounded by perfectly maintained lawns and colorful flowers, but today things looked different. The lawn was slightly overgrown, and the flower beds appeared neglected. After ringing the doorbell, there was a long silence before the door slowly opened. Standing there was a figure far removed from the mother Melissa remembered. Diane's hair was disheveled, her complexion was poor, and her eyes were red and swollen as if she'd been crying. Melissa, her voice sounded disbelieving. Hello, Mom, Melissa said quietly. Can we talk? Diane silently stepped aside and invited her daughter in. The living room wasn't in its usual orderly state, newspapers and magazines were scattered about, and several used coffee cups remained on the table. It was a sight Melissa had never seen before. I'll make some tea, Diane said, but it sounded more like something to say rather than a question. That's fine, Melissa sat down and watched her mother head to the kitchen. A few minutes later, Diane returned with 2 cups. They sat facing each other in silence. How's Jason? Diane was the first to speak. He's getting better. He's been moved to a general ward. That's good, Diane seemed genuinely relieved. Silence fell again. "Mom," Melissa said. "About your birthday." "Don't," Diane shook her head. "It was embarrassing." "But do you understand why no one came?" Diane stared at her cup and slowly nodded. "I do." "Now, anyway," she took a deep breath. "Carol came to see me yesterday. And she told me everything. How everyone felt, how self-centered I've been." "Mom." "No, listen," Diane raised her hand. "I've always felt the pressure to be perfect. My mother, your grandmother, always told me that foster women must be perfect. And instead of breaking that chain, I inherited it." Melissa had never seen her mother reflect on herself like this. "But there's no such thing as a perfect family, Mom," Melissa said quietly. "Nobody's perfect. We should start by acknowledging each other's weaknesses." "I'm so ashamed," tears welled up in Diane's eyes. "Especially about my reaction when Jason had his accident. My son-in-law was in critical condition, and all I could think about was my birthday. I won't ask for forgiveness. It's unforgivable." Something softened in Melissa's heart. She had never seen her mother like this before. "I forgive you," she said. "But let's start a new relationship from now on. One where we respect each other." They talked for a long time. About past wounds, unresolved feelings, and hopes for the future. The road to complete reconciliation would be long, but the first step had been taken. "Can I visit Jason?" Diane finally asked. Melissa smiled. "Of course. I think he'd like to see you too." When they arrived at the hospital, Jason was sitting in a chair by the window, reading a book. He looked up at them and flashed a warm smile. "Hello, Diane," he said. "It's nice to see you." "Jason." Diane hesitated slightly. I've been praying for your recovery." "Thank you," Jason said kindly. "Life is short and precious. We must cherish it." The three of them began to talk quietly in the soft light streaming through the hospital room window. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning filled with hope. A month later, gentle sunlight streamed into Melissa and Jason's home. Colorful balloons decorated the living room, and a small cake sat on the table. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Melissa emerged from the kitchen with a tray of coffee cups. "Is this enough to drink for everyone?" In the living room, Uncle Robert, Aunt Betty, and Cousin Carol were chatting. Their laughter seemed incredibly natural, considering the awkwardness of a few weeks ago. "Plenty, Melissa," Betty smiled. "Lovely party." "It's not elaborate enough to call it a party," Melissa shrugged sheepishly. "Just a small gathering to celebrate Mom's 60 years plus 1 month." The doorbell rang, and Jason went to answer it. He was still limping slightly but had recovered remarkably well. When he opened the door, Diane was standing there. "Hello, Diane," Jason welcomed her warmly. "Come in." Diane seemed a bit nervous but was smiling. Instead of her usual flashy outfit and perfect makeup, she wore a simple blouse and pants, giving off a more natural vibe. "Everyone came," she said as she entered the living room and saw the gathered relatives. "Of course," Carol stood up and hugged Diane. "Happy birthday, Aunt," a bit late, but still. In the pleasant atmosphere, everyone shared cake and chatted. Topics ranged from the weather to Jason's recovery and old family stories. But unlike before, it wasn't superficial conversation filled with tension, there was genuine warmth. "I'd like to say a few words," Diane stood up and said. Everyone quieted down and focused on her. "I wasn't a perfect mother. Or a perfect sister, or a perfect friend. But I want to learn from now on. I'm grateful for everyone's patience, and especially for Melissa and Jason's generosity." Her words were simple but heartfelt. Melissa looked at her mother and saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Let's take a picture." Robert suggested. He set up a camera on a tripod and set the timer. Everyone gather around. The whole family gathered on and around the sofa. Unlike the stiff smiles of the past intended to look perfect, there were natural smiles now. The shutter clicked, and that moment was preserved forever. "Your strength saved the family," Jason whispered in Melissa's ear. "I'm proud of you." As Melissa held her husband's hand, she quietly thought, "There's no such thing as a perfect family. But if you have the courage to come together even after being hurt, you can build a new relationship." Today was a new beginning. Not perfect, but that's okay. True bonds are born not from perfection, but from accepting each other's imperfections.